Miquela, it's great to have you here. Thank you for joining us. You have an interesting journey.
I do.
Starting from the corporate space.
In a way, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I was going back in the video vaults.
Oh, snap.
Back in the video vaults.
That's a few decades worth of videos.
Video vaults.
Oh, no.
16 years ago.
Yeah.
You're at some sort of outdoor, I don't know, it was a rally or some sort of convening, some sort of thing.
Yes.
And you literally start by saying, I was in the corporate space.
Yeah.
And I decided very quickly that was not for me.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that correct?
This is correct. You really did a good job. I forgot I said that. No. So I moved to New York with the idea that I would be a planner because that was my undergrad. And like many folks who come to New York, not really understanding anything, that was me. I could not get a job as a planner. And I actually waited tables, which I did in college. And I was working double shifts, 6 days a week. And then one of the bartenders worked only on the weekend. She's like, oh, I'm a paralegal at a big corporate law firm. And so I'm like, okay, well, that sounds a little better on the resume. So I became a paralegal at a big corporate law firm. I actually worked in the World Trade Center.
Oh, you did?
I did. I was there that day.
You were there.
Yeah. But I had taken a new assignment with one of our corporate clients, Merrill Lynch. And so I started working inside Merrill Lynch's offices in New Jersey. So I was a paralegal working inside one of our clients. And I did that for a couple of years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did not measure up, did not.
No, because
it wasn't the thing you were seeking to do to start with.
It was just a temporary moment while I then went to grad school because that's what I learned. New York needed a graduate degree for me to be a planner.
That's exactly what they say.
That's what they say.
Get your graduate degree.
Get your graduate. I mean, every job posting was like, graduate degree required. And that would have been smart to have read before I moved to New York. But I was in the middle
You're
of
a planner.
I'm a planner, but I didn't plan well. But it was one of those things where in Oregon, where I grew up, the planners are in more demand because of the land use laws require it for a variety of reasons. And so I was like, the market has to be just so much bigger in New York because, of course, there is more to plan. So the market should be better for someone like me. I don't need. I'll start looking for jobs as soon as I graduate, and those 2 months of research provided real insight that I did not do enough research.
That more planning was needed.
More planning was needed. Yeah.
When do you decide during the course of your life path about planning being your focus? How do you come to realize that? I'm
one of those individuals out there who is both a chaotic engine of energy and ideas and then also like a moment of reflection and introspection. I probably should do that last part more often, but nonetheless, I do it. Yeah. And in one of those moments, I kid you not, in high school, it was like my senior year, and I'm like, okay, I think maybe I'll be a lawyer, like all these things. I like history. I like talking to people. But then something clicked where I'm like, lawyers actually do a lot more writing. And I like to write, but not that much. Yeah. The TV dramas make it exciting, but I've somehow learned that that's like a small percentage of lawyers out there. And I came across a career book in my class. I kid you not.
The old school career books.
Career book, like, planning?
Yes.
What is this?
Yes.
And I read about what all planners do. I'm like, yes, I like talking to people. I like doing research. I like being able to make presentations. I like to bring people along. I like to translate, not literally translate language, but like translate interests and create alignment. I do that all the time with my family.
Yeah.
So like
you've already practiced this.
Exactly. And I care about the environment, and I don't think we treat it as well as we could.
That's right.
There's an element of that. And it's basically how my brain is always thinking in systems. To me, planning is a lot of that. I mean, obviously, people sometimes focus on one track. I'm sort of that generalist. So that's how I chose planning and then found a program at the University of Oregon. I did that, and I graduated with an undergrad in planning, which is kind of rare, and then I couldn't get a job in New York. But eventually I went to graduate school at Pratt for planning.
For more planning.
For more planning.
What did you learn at Pratt? What was the biggest takeaway from Pratt?
So many. I'm going to try to boil it down to one. One is that to do real community engagement, you really need to put on the shelf your assumptions and check your biases. You can't get rid of them. But to like be up front and or like take stock when you hit the nerve. of a community's point of view is very different than what you should do on the books or what the objective is, and you get that resistance. There's a story there. And so Pratt and the experience I had at Pratt, I mean, one of the first classes we did a studio up in the Bronx, actually, and it was trying to find this balance between housing and some of the community gardens. And the gardens were going to, in the next phase of the HPD's planning to implement housing, they were going to have to get rid of a lot of these community gardens. Finally, the tide had turned. They were starting to do that development, and all the gardeners were pissed and angry. And so we, as a studio, came up with plans. And it was an interesting moment where my fellow, student friends, we had the idea of we're going to create more space. We're going to consolidate everyone's garden. And I don't remember what my other classmates did for their plans, but I just remember at some point I was thinking, something tells me I think they're going to be pissed that we got rid of their garden. But my fellow classmates were like, but they're going to get more space in total. They should be happier. Right. I'm like, true, but I have a feeling that's kind of personal. And it's I just have a feeling. And we were yelled at, little grad students, innocently, hey, this is good for you. You get more room.
Look at the great ideas we have.
Right. And they were not happy at all. And my classmates were like, I can't believe they... And again, it was that thing that stuck with me. I'm so glad I had this painful experience.
Yes.
We're not paid yet. We're paying to learn. And nonetheless, this cemented something I kind of knew but didn't have the real life experience doing. So I would say Pratt taught me a couple of things. And one, my gut on people is generally right if I take the time to listen. And two, there's always a deeper backstory that a lot of times we on paper or due to whoever tells us on high, we need to do X, Y, and Z, that if we don't take time to take stock of how will this land? How will people receive this? If we just, is it tone deaf? What have we done to reflect something we've learned from then in this, and are we making those connections evident? And so that whole experience for me at Pratt just, again, cemented some of that sort of gut I had, an understanding of not necessarily, I'm not a psychologist, but a sense of the psychology of people and what motivates us, and it just grounded it.
Love that. Fascinating. What you learned and your biggest takeaway was something prompted in the classroom, learned outside. I probably digested outside the classroom.
Right. Yeah.
And as you were saying that, I was reflecting on my experiences in East Harlem. Learned very valuable lessons from my time in human services, social services, as an executive director, Upper East Side and East Harlem, in particular, about this idea of community resilience, community pride, community investment, community opinion, and how that, as you said, you may come to the table with what you think is revolutionary, totally amazing. This is going to be a win.
Right.
And you've
Everyone
not done,
wins.
Everyone wins.
Everyone wins.
And
You're going to love it.
You've not done the work of listening, appreciating, understanding. And some of us have, I think, that innate sense of that.
Yes.
Some of that you have to learn.
Yes.
But you can also be folks can be remarkably tone deaf in ways that automatically turn something that the germ of an idea becomes toxic cesspool. And not because there's anything other than we're not doing the starting point, which is let's get to know each other. Right.
And I think my time, so that grounded me. And then eventually I got to actually work as a planner. And then my first job in New York in that role was up in the Bronx. And definitely that chapter worked in the Borough President's Economic Arm. So it was the Bronx, I think they're called BXEDC now, but at the time it was BOEDC. And, it cemented other things that I didn't quite understand. Again, in the classroom, I thought different minority groups would all, band together and fight the white man, basically, because as a white Latina, I, wanted to care, but it felt always like an interloper. And especially from my childhood in Oregon, okay, here I am one of 3 white people in this office. So I come from the corporate world where basically everyone looked like me for the most part. Now I'm going in opposite, and it was an amazing immersive, okay, I am going to help, but I need to listen, pace myself, and is one of those things where oftentimes I noticed the dynamic in the Bronx. It was very much like, oh, what is like City Hall or like the others want of us, and we're not going to be used to do your bidding. And so like it further cemented like this on a different scale. And it was a time also where a lot of big projects were happening with Bloomberg. So they were, getting rid of the markets that were predominantly Caribbean produce markets to make way for a new mall that related companies wanted to build.
Familiar name in this neighborhood.
Yes, on the river there, the Harlem River. And also they were trying to, at the time, the City Hall was trying to push a jail in the Bronx as well. So there was just a lot of interesting development happening around that time, and it was a really fun chapter because of all that activity. Oftentimes there's like these. New York obviously always evolves, but like it was a hyper intense moment in the Bronx. It felt, at least for my career.
Tell me about. So I was curious. So I was again exploring a little bit here. Something called the South Bronx Greenway.
Yes.
And this is the Sustainable South Bronx focus, right? And I was listening to a presentation you made a number of years ago about this vision that existed at the time of there's a park. I think it was the idea there's a park. Or, I'm sorry, there was an abandoned lot or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, what more can happen here?
Right.
And thinking about the park, I'm thinking about bike and pedestrian pathways, and the park is the anchor, but now it goes to the water. And can you tell me the genesis of that and then how it evolved? Because the presentation is sort of painting a picture of what could be, and just this idea of what the community needs and thinks, and what we understand about how plans work, but also added dimension here. Nothing moves as quickly or as easily as one might imagine. No. I don't think that's probably true everywhere, but I can imagine in New York City, it's just added layers of complexity.
Exactly.
Tell me about whatever of that experience you can draw from that, because I'd love to know what the vision was and how things evolved.
Right. Well, so I, in many ways, inherited the baton, or the baton was passed on to me. The founder of the organization, Miquela Craytor, Sustainable South Bronx, was, her.
Shout out to Miquela Craytor.
Yes. And that work she started was really built out of the work actually she started, I think, even at the Point. She was an organizer there. So, like, when you think about all these plans, and even plans outside of this example, there's always the backstory. Yeah. And so a moment in time, you might just get one layer of it, but the if you go a little deeper, you'll see the historic origins, which are many times decades old. So the work that I had the baton passed on, of Sustainable South Bronx, started long before me. And it was really about like this push on this part of the South Bronx is underparked. We have this gem of a natural resource that our backs are turned against. We can't access it. And that only is not fair, it's inequitable. And we, Majora and many other community partners, were really thoughtful and were able to write a grant application for congestion mitigation funding. I think it's CMAC for short. It's federal DOT money. And it was a planning grant, if I remember correctly, which is now a few decades. And basically that planning grant helped create the vision. And we worked with an incredible landscape architect, Signe Nielsen, who, the key thing here is telling a story and aligning with really smart people who had made moves in other places, right? So Signe's knowledge and working on mega project helped inform, plus her name was amazing and it got us a lot of street cred, combined with the organizing power and connections of community organizers throughout the Hunts Point and other parts of the South Bronx. And again, the story of like, we're underparked and this is, we deserve our fair share. So that combined with the planning money, became this vision of like, what can we do to create more connections? You can't expect people to get out of their cars if there's no alternative. Right. And so that was like, again, multi-layered, like multifaceted. And the other thing that I didn't even know until I joined Sustainable South Bronx, the other thing that really I found so powerful about that work that we were doing was the fact that it was also tied to jobs. So at the same time we were pushing for this park, we had a green job training program. And the training program was training, predominantly folks from the Bronx, but we actually took students or individuals from across the city. And believe me, there were participants who were coming from Queens and Brooklyn. So like they came all the way up to the Bronx. And we basically had a 16-week program where folks were learning about tree pruning. They were learning about soil and like good soil, bad soil. They got certified in that. They got OSHA training, all the credentials that would get the individual a job at parks or at Botanical Gardens was one of our key partners. We even found jobs, again, horticulture maintenance in, believe it or not, some of the bigger cemeteries across the city needed, and they paid well. And some of those jobs were actually union jobs. So what we saw is like while we're creating this vision, we're also creating the talent pipeline to maintain it, to build it. And so we didn't want to do it where it's somebody else doing the construction and maintaining. We wanted to create the infrastructure projects that also create the job demand. And we didn't want to have someone say, well, there's no one qualified in the neighborhood. We were changing that narrative. And that was always, for me, the fun part of working there and sort of how I sort of, if you will, like that was another element of my journey in my career path was trying to see this duality of like investment combined with, okay, what is that gap of investment should benefit the most local impacted community, and the typical excuse businesses or others make is like, oh, well, no one's qualified to do the work.
That's right.
And so tie that workforce strategy to that and use the end date of when they need to open to be the sort of working backwards from that.
That's right. And that's the scaffolding.
Yes.
And by the way, you started by talking a little bit about the corporate structure.
Yeah.
And white men, fuck white guys.
Fuck white guys.
Okay. Just want to make sure we were on the same page.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a real thing. Like, I feel really uniquely blessed to have been in places where I am a minority. And at the same time, I am the majority, right? And so it definitely has shaped, I think, the other side of how I think about engagement and collaboration and checking myself. Because I had to, like, who are you, girl, walking in thinking you know all that? Yeah. And so it is, I definitely credit my parents, my mother mostly on like that levelness of like trying to see past whatever we look like. But I couldn't really understand that in Oregon, given I look like everybody else for the most part. So I'm like, sure, theoretically, it got you. And then working in the Bronx, I was like, okay, this is a little different than what I was taught and aware of.
That's right. And I've certainly spent the majority of my career in settings where mindful that I am the white guy in the room, the older, graying white guy in the room, and understanding in every way, shape, and form the systemic, the historic, everything about that that is triggering, toxic, traumatic, harmful, overwhelming, and just trying to start from the perspective of, I'm going to continue to be here, I'm going to continue to listen, I'm going to continue to try to figure out how to be, starting with the perspective of, I want to honor and respect you, and I think maybe I have something to offer to build on that.
Yeah. I think that's so important, and it's one of those things where I try to remind myself not to take it personally when I can feel like someone sort of like put me in that box, because we all do it in some ways, consciously or not. Absolutely. And so if I fixate, why aren't they listening, or why aren't they doing what I'm telling them, or why are they not like engaging with me in the way that I want to like try to rapport with them? If I stay mentally there, we'll never see the longer term goal and meet there. That's right. And I want to be there not alone. I want to do it with partners. And so I think that, again, multiple years of experience of like testing approaches and systems. I mean, like one interesting project, early days working in the borough president's office, I could name names, but I won't.
We'll do those offline.
Yeah,
we'll do
those offline.
If you're listening, if you're listening now, imagine who it is.
Right.
Paint a picture in your head.
Paint a picture in your head. So I basically, a bunch of community groups came in and shared this great vision for a project. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I've learned in graduate school. This is exactly the type of work that is creating jobs. It's eco-industrial concepts. It's growing businesses. It's restoring a really like neglected part of the Bronx, all the wins. And the person I reported into at the time said all the complimentary things to the team, like put a proposal together. and walked out of the room. And I was the person who was going to follow up.
Mm-hmm.
And a few days later, he asked me, what'd you think? I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm so excited. And he's like, yeah, it's never going to happen. I'm like, what are you talking about? You said, you gave the impression that you're going to fund it. He's like, yeah, there's no way. He didn't explain why, whether it was the politics, was there the individuals in the group, there was beef or history. Again, I was like a month into the job.
Yeah.
But it put me in a very difficult place because now I'm representing someone who gave the impression to these nonprofit leaders who are going to put their time, limited time as it is, into a proposal, and he's not planning to move it forward, and or he already knows it's dead on arrival. So I kept thinking, what the fuck?
Yeah,
like,
what the fuck?
What the fuck? Like, why are we wasting their time? And it's so disingenuous. And then how can you build trust and goodwill? And so that was another layer in my journey of like, I'm going to do my best where I can, wherever I'm at, to talk truth. So when I was given the proposal, I said, listen, you're missing X, Y, and Z. And I got a lot of flack from the groups. And like, you're trying to derail us. You're trying to, you're blocking. I'm like, I'm not. Believe it or not, I am not. I'm letting you know. I see proposals come in. I already know what you're missing. I'm not saying what I'm going to give you in terms of guidance will get you there, but I know you can't get to a yes without these additional items. And it took a few rounds because they really thought I was just being difficult.
Yeah.
But I want to tell you, I got it funded.
There you go. It got funded.
It did. And not just because, but they did the work. They filled in those gaps of numbers and background data and all the other things that the normal proposals were that were approved needed. And that's, I think, this other side of power and dynamics of like where truth is a little obscure is partly because we're not being honest about what is needed to like fit the bill. And I totally took us on a different direction, but I couldn't help myself.
I'm glad you did. I mean, I feel I'm a big fan of an author, John Kingdon. It talks about how things get to the top of the priority list for elected officials, and talks about it from the perspective of an intersection of a problem, a policy, and politics, and they have to come together to open the window of action, right?
Nice.
Clear problem, opportunity related to policy that is digestible, understandable, and actionable, right? But then there's got to be political wins associated with that.
Right.
And that doesn't do anything except make something a priority. You still need all of the machinations that it takes to move a priority into something that actually, hopefully, transforms people's lives in a positive way.
Right.
And throughout the course of that, like I do, a problem becomes multi-stage, multi-dimensional. How do you sort through? How do we even agree on what the issue is?
Right.
To what's the best solution?
Right.
Which probably is going to suggest compromise, which is agonizing, to the idea that if I'm an elected, I got to be able to say to people, look what I accomplished.
Right.
But then at the end of the day, you still have to put the content together to know the right people to push something forward. That's not just planning now. That's also like the machinations of things that you probably can't learn unless you're
doing it,
sitting directly across the table. And by the way, those folks who probably heard from the elected official day one that this was like a good idea, left that meeting, had lunch, and were like, it's going to happen.
Yeah, basically.
And then when they hear it's not, it's agonizing.
Yeah.
So credit to you for trying to give all of the right guidance and support to get somewhere.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't happen as much as it should. And again, there's nothing but powerful, amazing, remarkable people in city government, state government, et cetera. There's so many people who work so hard, and there's so many amazing elected officials.
100%.
But it takes a lot.
It takes a lot. And this was extra time that I didn't necessarily have.
Right.
But what mattered to me was my integrity. And if I know this cannot get funded, I'll explain why within reason or limit whatever.
Truth-telling. There's the truth-telling.
Yeah, but I won't try to give false hope. And I think what hit hard for me in learning about the history of the Bronx and other areas that have been disinvested in is this frustration. And many people gave up We're like, have lost hope. And here's this group with this great, hopeful idea that's creating jobs, all the things, right? So I'm like, yes, of course. And to give false hope that they could move forward, I just couldn't stomach it. And so that's why I was like, I'll just be as brutally honest as I can. Again, I'm not allowed to make moves or lobby internally, but I can tell you what you're missing. And it's hard when you're inside. I mean, because I worked at EDC later and I worked at SBS. The tension point of like feeling that you're going ahead of your principal, right? Like going above your boss. And so in government, you know, everything's all encompassing. So in many ways, you're even more narrow. So trying to find the edges of being able to be as honest as you can is really difficult. And I think to your larger point, it is not easily known what that is. And it's not like internally you get much guidance. And because I had all this other experience in navigating these circles on both sides, both being inside a government entity and then being an advocate and seeing, okay, I have to teach this government person that there's a gray zone. We can talk and talk the same language. So I'm going to basically try to prod and give them space. Like, I'm not going to hold you accountable, but help me understand a little bit more what's going on so I have a better picture so that if I decide to move forward with this advocacy campaign or X, Y, and Z, I know really what I'm dealing with. Because basically there's this dynamic where people distract and push over here as a way almost to keep you busy when the real game is over there. And I know that. Yeah. But not everyone does.
No.
And that's the sort of the element of like, you don't mess. Like, just give me the real talk. I'm not going to like advertise it anywhere. So, yeah.
This is a fascinating deep dive into politics and power, and I really appreciate that so much. And in that space, I can't help but dive a little deeper into the Bronx.
Yeah.
The data on the Bronx has never been great. The true cost of living data that's come to light. If you want to talk about asthma rates, I mean, no matter what you put forward, job opportunities, economic security, economic mobility, the pathways to just people's health and wellness, all the social determinants of health, the Bronx continues to struggle.
Yes.
I am to this idea of politics and power and gray zones. I feel like this city continues to sort of operate from the perspective of we probably know a lot more than we give ourselves credit for sometimes in terms of what are good, innovative solutions.
Right.
We have to make choices about where the dollars move, of course. There are, as we pointed out, some very skilled electeds and gov folks and philanthropists and otherwise.
Yeah.
Unions, workforce development providers, community-based organizations. Why is the Bronx still a space in this city with all of its resilience, all of its vibrance, all of its opportunity? Why do you think it still is in the position that it is in? Because specifically, just looking at the data, it is at a crisis point and has been for a long time. What do you think it is that keeps us from making progress? And that's not to suggest progress isn't being made.
Right.
From Sustainable South Bronx and other pathways and opportunities.
Right.
But just overall, the numbers don't add up.
They don't. One thing I learned a while back, and so I think it plays into this, though I can't say if it's still accurate, but at the time, this is Bloomberg term 1, term 2. I think it was
3, 4, 5.
Yeah, I don't know. Is he still in office? Some may wish.
Yeah, right. Some people talk about how much they wish it was.
Exactly. So it was definitely term 1 or 2. But with some of the rezonings that were happening across the city, we were starting to track data. We worked very closely with Pratt Center at the time. We were on a number of brownfield opportunity area grants that were state funded, and in that collaboration with them, we were looking at trends, housing trends, and income level trends. What we found was that the Bronx was receiving essentially a receiver of people And so population was increasing in certain neighborhoods, but the incomes were staying low. And what it was telling us is that people are basically internal migration inside the city, moving from other low-income neighborhoods that were rezoned or the housing was taken away, and they were moving to the Bronx as the last resort, right? Or the next easiest, best place, staying inside the city that they could afford.
Yeah.
And so I think, I'm not saying that is part or a fundamental aspect of what you've, questioned here, but I definitely think it's contributing to it. Because at the end of the day, as the city has become less affordable for those who don't have options, they're going to be going to the most affordable locations. And the Bronx has predominantly been that place.
That's right.
And so that is less to say that those amazing efforts by a number of nonprofits and electeds are doing things. It's just you can't keep up with the demand that has not gone away. So I think that's the fundamental thing that goes beyond the shoulders of those in the Bronx. But it's really a problem and a challenge and an obligation of those in leadership across the city to think comprehensively. And this is, it's hard not to get into your little fiefdoms. I mean, the city is so amazingly overwhelming. There's so much going on. Yeah. But the lack of the strategy that goes even beyond our 5 boroughs to see where job demand centers are and how does that match to the talents surrounding them, and or what can we do to make those connections. I mean, again, it's an amazingly overwhelming system, but I think this part on housing is a real critical element to it. And if we found more creative ways to be able to allow people to get closer to where they start in terms of an affordability option, I think the Bronx would continue to shoulder this weight.
Let's fast forward to your time at EDC.
Yeah.
Here we are now. I'm watching a video of you, YouTube, Laura Flanders and Friends. Fascinating. Laura says there are 2 million people in poverty in New York City. 1 in 5 are unemployed. She turns to you and says, we want a people-centered economy, right? That's important to us. And we need economic transformation. How do we get that to happen? And literally ends it by saying, because we have a new mayor and there's a fresh perspective. This was 12 years ago is when that was posted. So, and I just thought as I was watching that, I'm like, all of that sounds awfully familiar to today.
It does.
Tell me about the EDC journey. Tell me about, and again, it's a little bit of a reflection on what you have been through. Yeah. And now we're pivoting a little bit to where we are now.
Right. Well, my journey to EDC, I always kind of somewhat shocked and appreciative of it. One of my last things we did at Sustainable, we actually sued EDC because they were trying to build a jail. And so I love to say when I joined EDC, I'm like, someone clearly didn't read the fine print because I don't know why they hired me. I mean, we won the lawsuit after all. So
you want that on your side. That's sometimes you want.
Exactly.
That's who I want on my side.
Exactly.
Is someone who can.
That's what
who understands the inner workings of
pointed out.
Right.
Exactly. Although no one I really interacted with seemed to know that storyline. So I'm like, all right, fine. So I joined EDC, and it's interesting because I was doing environmental justice, campaign work. We at Sustainable, I always refer, we work on environmental justice. We're not an EJ group because that is typically a membership base. That's not us. However, we work on the issues of inequity and economic justice challenges. And what I found in that time, working and collaborating in partnership with some industrial companies, I started to understand them in a different way. So when the job opportunity came at EDC, I was initially primarily only focused on industrial policy. I was, this was Bloomberg term 3. And I was handed, my role is to focus on industrial initiatives. I had 22 that I was responsible for. About 11 of those were EDC run and operated, and the remaining were other agencies that I had to track, but I didn't have to necessarily, do. And my time at EDC, what made me think of industrial was actually this very issue of things that created places like Hunts Point or the other EJ communities across the city and frankly throughout the world, is how industry shifted And in the wake of manufacturing leaving, a lot of those manufacturers weren't doing things right, chemical-wise or environmental harm. At the time, maybe they knew, some did, some didn't. Not even going to get into that totally. But the point is the anchoring of stability in economic jobs and career paths for families, that stability is precious. And what I saw in our work at Sustainable is that we had two different ways of working with industrial companies. One, sometimes we advocate to get them to clean up their act. Other times it was educate and partner. And the success in the educate and partner was so powerful. I saw the need on the industrial side. How do I get more companies to be ready to partner, to do the things that I thought were very powerful in terms of the job stability side? So that's why I made that weird leap from Sustainable South Bronx work to working on industrial policy for EDC. And then the other side of my time there, I was able to oversee a number of other initiatives focused on income mobility. And that's where I had a lot of fun holding developers' feet to the fire when it came to hiring provisions. We had a program at the time called Hire NYC, and under my time there, we were able to increase the expectations of developers. What I found really challenging, though, at that time was that some of those developers, they didn't like having their hands tied to obligate on permanent hiring. And so
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and so it was a fascinating moment where I saw so many of my colleagues focused on just getting the deal done and trusting the developer, when I was like, no, I know how this works. I actually the developer is afraid of any complication, and I truly respect that. We're not going to make it so they can't close their deal, but if you just bow to them too early, we've lost our window of leverage. And so I'm excited, perhaps, with this new chapter where that hopefully is known by others within certain agencies when it comes to deal making, because oftentimes a lot of, you just say no outright when it comes to creating requests or requirements of developers. And so my time at EDC was a fun chapter. It was an intense chapter, and from there I went to SBS.
What would you say about again, more learning on the developers? What were your experience with developers? What did you see that was maybe inspiring or exciting to think about? What was it that you saw, and you've already highlighted some of this, that was a frustration?
So one of the things that was exciting was those developers who really did their homework, who, whether they learned from a nonprofit or another community organization about their interests and found a way to align their interests to the development itself, be it not just a very standard thing, we're going to create a community center, but the morally, hey, we're going to work with this group as a workforce partner, or we're going to create ways where this arts organization can be creating arts space, where there's the Venn diagram of mutual shared interests. I found those developers to be the most exciting. And then there were several of them who got the part on the job side. I mean, having the opportunity for a partner on the ground who would help source talent and work backwards. If you want to open this day, you need X number of people. We can work backwards with you so that you have qualified talent. We're not forcing you to hire anyone, but we're going to give you the best candidates that are qualified based on the metrics or the skills that you're looking for. So it's just the challenge is a lot of developers, their knowledge is just not the workforce. It's just penciling the deal. The ones that were more, again, this is a couple decades now. I feel as a whole, developers have, some, not all, have evolved and realized that they need to step up their game. But it was a little foreign to many at the time who, felt like we'll just get a yes because we're looking, we can show you the shiny stuff, and that's all people are caring about. I me personally, professionally, I like the stuff behind the shine. And those developers who were willing to talk about that, I found to be the best and most creative.
I mean, there's an assumption sometimes that just, if you're in the developer space, you're either thought of as, you're championed in some ways as the entity that's coming in to invest and transform, and that's super exciting to some. And others just see them straight up as evil doers.
Yes, they do.
Who are just eating up the city.
Yes.
The truth is probably somewhere
In between.
In between.
Totally
Like all
is.
things. The truth is somewhere in between.
No, yeah. I mean, it totally is. I mean, it's one of those things where I'll give you a few examples. Like one housing developer that we, when I was in the Bronx, that we, worked with, they solicited our opinion when I was at Sustainable. And, we were like, well, these are different strategies you can make sure you're greening your building, because our whole thing was green, stormwater, infrastructure, all the 9 yards. And so, like, that input, they evolved and shifted and accommodated and increased the amount of green. But it wasn't just that. It's like, and we have trainees who can be part of, like, the maintenance team. And so those were the developers who were thinking less easy transaction, but like more intentional with local investment. And I do think as the hyper intensity of our city in terms of what space is left, and to the extent you have to do something new, it's that much more complicated. And I think for those reasons, developers have evolved and shifted to up their game on that. And one fun project I love to point out is something recently like that GMDC did in partnership with another group to build housing as well as manufacturing space, so that there's an anchor of economic development and space that small businesses need. These are, light manufacturing jobs. At the same time, you have affordable housing. And like that is such an amazing story of how you can do it together. But this is the tension point, is like the fear of change is a prevalent thing that I think affects all of this mix of like the fear of change. Any development is seen bad out the gate versus let's tinker with it to actually do the things we want.
That's right. I had an interesting experience. I went to go visit one of the visioning sessions for the Brooklyn Marine Terminal. And I really appreciated a number of different things. First off, I loved the cast of characters in the room. And I mean that with love and appreciation. From the community activists to local residents to folks who clearly were at every session to folks who literally wandered in as if they were tourists. And someone said, it's an open house, and they just wandered in. And I love the presenters because, and I don't remember what firm it was, although full disclosure, I was in some part of an advisory group, one of the subset advisory groups in that space. And I was just literally coming in as a citizen of Brooklyn. And what I loved was they did a PowerPoint thing, but then they literally like laid out a giant chess like board, right? Like it's almost like a Risk game, giant board, and said, this is mapped out geographically to what we have to work with. And they go, we think we can put in manufacturing space, we can put in the transportation space that we need, and we can think about housing, and we can think about workforce development, we can think about parks, we can think about... And then they sort of said to people, okay, you, like it was Monopoly, you take all the pieces... Figure out where you want them. Figure out where you want them. And then what we're going to do is we're going to calculate the cost benefit of that strategy. And what was interesting was they were starting from the perspective of we have to get to this number to make this project sustainable. And of course, over the course of an hour, watching different groups do this, they couldn't get to the magic number.
Of course not.
And I thought, first, that was fascinating because it was really interesting to watch people who are opinionated in a number of different ways, and then some folks who are literally like, I don't even know what this thing is. But I just want to have the biggest park imaginable. Try to talk to each other as New Yorkers, as Brooklynites, as people with different interests. And then, people actually working the numbers on the side and kind of going,
it's still not there.
It doesn't work though. And you might say, well, the original math is wrong, and you don't know what you're talking. You could go that route, but just from that essence. And I was just thinking as that was happening, what do we learn from that? What do we gain from that? On one hand, that's your process of getting public involvement in complex projects. Regardless of what it is, right? So we're getting public engagement. The other piece of this, of course, is that nothing is easy here, and there is going to need to be compromise. And you might argue, well, we ended up back where we started because we still don't have an answer. I guess I'm just wondering, and you're pivoting to the Brooklyn conversation a little bit. There's a lot happening in Brooklyn, and you've had your interests and focus points in a lot of different pieces of that puzzle, Brooklyn Marine Terminal and otherwise. I'm curious what you see in Brooklyn now, what you learned from Brooklyn. Because we got to explore the Bronx. Let's pivot to Brooklyn.
No, I mean, Well, first of all, that example is I love it on a number of levels. To your point, is that it helps folks realize the trade-offs. And oftentimes, when you're very singular focus on one of your particular interest area, you don't realize, like, if I take up all the space for parks, where are the folks who need the jobs, and what have we done there? And so, again, for me, the sweet spot is finding the place where we all get a little bit of something, but there's going to be parts that we're not getting. And to me, like, success is where everyone's a little frustrated. That means we've won. Because if everyone's a little frustrated, not one single group won over the others. So, like, my work right now in the Brooklyn, I've, when I went from EDC and SBS, I worked across the city, in all the different boroughs on a number of different initiatives. And then currently I'm, like, working and supporting Southwest Brooklyn Industrial Development Corporation. I served as the interim ED for a while. The ED was on family leave, and now I'm back serving them still as the senior advisor on a number of projects. And what to me is exciting about Brooklyn, Southwest Brooklyn in particular, is, we see these legacy waterfront industrial areas like Southwest Brooklyn, and there's still a lot of manufacturing. It's not at all what it was back, and nor do we as an organization expect it to be. But as a whole, every year we're serving a little over 250 companies through unique efforts, whether it's they're attending one of our training programs, whether we're helping them navigate government. What's exciting to me is some of the new work we're doing, which is honestly was like back in my time in the Bronx, my goal of goals, which was helping legacy industrial companies connect to new opportunities to be not just resilient from an economic standpoint, but resilient in the solution space for a changing climate.
That's right.
And so some of our more recent work has been helping these legacy firms find a way to pivot and or align with some of these growing sectors like offshore wind, like building electrification. So one of the projects actually we're funded to deliver on is actually funded by EDC. It's called WeSource. And initially it was all offshore wind, but we all know some things shifted down in DC, and that caused a little mayhem. And so that said, we ourselves were able to pivot and then move and include another, still helping legacy companies, but now it's not just offshore wind, but also building electrification. So when you have this demand of change like Local Law 97 and other energy efficiency mandates, it creates that new market demand. And our play here is how do we help these existing companies whose perhaps work they're doing is not necessarily not working, but they're well positioned with some additional work to play a role in this economy, in this new market. And so that's where our technical assistance, that's where our trust, having over 40 years of working with companies and our name and recognition of what we offer, we're building off that. And then, we meet these companies where they're at. So we're not it's a combination of education, excitement, and real reality, meaning that there are real dollars here in contracts that we can connect you to. And so we've had some really amazing wins, like in the offshore wind space, for example. Some of the companies we've helped out, they're getting large contracts with Equinor and Vestas. And so it's really exciting because the concept was there, and now we're seeing the fruits of the labor.
There are folks who are listening who are saying, I want to be involved with that. I want to train the next iteration of our workforce in that particular space.
Yeah.
I am fascinated as to how it is we can find an on-ramp into that, and then would also say, I have a lot of ideas about how it could be, but I keep getting stifled, whether it's projects that maybe are opportunity-based, but then Green Economy Action Plan, look at all these jobs that are available, but then it becomes difficult to figure out exactly where those jobs are. You highlighted on a federal level changes that have derailed in some space. The city's investment in how it is that specifically the green workforce is continuing to grow and evolve, and pivoting as well to industry and manufacturing, et cetera. I guess I'm just wondering, there's nothing but people right now who are listening to this podcast and thinking, I want to get my foot in the door. How do I do that?
Right.
And what would you suggest? What would you say from both your planner hat and your let's talk about the reality of where we are in a city right now that is perhaps maybe the right word is stumbling its way towards a an ongoing budget challenge, a governor thinking about climate in different ways and how she wants to respond and be responsive to opportunities. How do you think about that? How do you let people know that there's maybe some there, or would you say, here's what you need to know to get to there?
So many ways to approach that question. So I'll start.
I try to do that. I try to put questions out that you come at from 27 different directions.
I love it. I mean, like, choose my own adventure, but I'll still end up at the same place.
I'm super choose your own adventure. I love that.
Yeah. No, that's my jam. All right. So I'll take from the perspective, potential listener could be a job seeker. Like, I have an architectural background, or I have been in the service industry, but I want to have more meaningful path. This job is not steady. It's not my jam. I want something else. So from a job seeker perspective, the good news is there's a lot of different amazing nonprofits out there who are doing the various forms of training in the green economy now. So if I was that person, I'd be like, okay, what borough am I at? Which of the many nonprofits focusing on this stuff is aligned? Also, what am I pivoting from? Whether I've done, retail, I've done other, I have a college degree or not, like, depending on where that is. And then, like, sort of like map out, how does this skill align to certain industries? Like, one of the fun things, I spent a lot of time working with offshore wind. One of my prior consulting gigs was working with the Bureau of Oceanic Energy Management, BOEM for short, and I ran their facilitated their environmental justice working groups. And in that, like, the key thing, what I know from workforce time and what I know from the industry side, is the fact that a lot of the jobs for these areas, it's a green job, but it's really still sales. They still need salespeople. They need salespeople in terms of, selling components. If a company is selling components to the developer, somebody's selling pieces, and they need somebody who can handle sales. There's people who do marketing. That marketing, you could be marketing a product for Nike, but now you could do marketing for a company. They're, presenting them, et cetera. So the cool thing for me with thinking about green jobs is always there's no wrong place, just like your question, no wrong place to start. Right. It's more first checking in with yourself and where you're at in terms of, like, if I already have some baseline of skill set, how do I pivot into the industry versus I don't have much yet and it's really hard to translate what I do have. So I need a little bit more. I need that bump of skill credentials. And if that's the case, then, again, start where geographically you are, and or if it's like, I want to do building electrification, or this type of area really excites me, solar installation. There's just, the good news is there's far more groups doing this in the city than there was when I started this, when the early aughts, when people thought we were crazy when we said the word green jobs.
And look at it now.
I just remember sitting in various meetings with City Hall and otherwise pushing on green jobs. And I mean, still there are people who are like, what are green jobs? Like, essentially, any job doing something that does something better for our planet technically can be a green job. You're a marketing expert. You could be a marketing expert to encourage oil and gas, or you could be a marketing expert supporting renewable. Still a marketing expert.
I love it. This is perfection. And we're going to do a lightning round to wrap us up. And I suspect we can continue this conversation in future podcasts because there's so much ground to cover. Yeah, but I gotta do the lightning round. Here it is.
Okay.
Quick responses. Jen Tausig. Shout out to Jen Tausig.
I love Jen.
She called you the OG in green workforce. Do you agree?
Yes.
Love it. No doubt.
Thank you, Jen.
Lightning round. We didn't dig into SBS, but I know that you had your foothold in that space. One of the things you championed that is under the SBS umbrella, worker cooperatives.
Yes.
Worker cooperatives, hugely important, impactful, dynamic. We need to invest in them more. Yes or no?
Yes.
Agreed. Anything else you want to say about worker co-ops?
Yeah, I mean, basically what's exciting about them, and just, them as a premise, is opening the door to think about how employers engage their workers. And so whether it's a worker cooperative or in the family, if you will, of worker investment and some form of, ownership, whether it's shares or some ability that the company's success is matched to what employees also benefit from. And it's really difficult to be fully transparent in a number of ways. But I know personally, the companies and organizations I worked for where the level of transparency that could be shared, I found really important and valuable. And I think worker cooperatives, it is that space of shared decision making. So I'm excited by that. I also know how challenging it is. So that's why I believe in it, and I believe in the family tree of what it stands for, and that there's other ways a more traditional business can add elements that are in line with worker cooperatives.
Beautifully said. 2 more lightning round questions. Do you see the intersection of environmental justice and economic justice in being critical to the city's future?
Yes. I can say a lot more, but I don't know if it's a lightning round.
Say more.
They are intrinsically connected. Environmental justice and economic justice, it's really about also our health and well-being. So you can't really have health and well-being if you are sick, and then you can't keep your job if you can't show up because you took your kid to the asthma clinic in the middle of the night or get them to school. And their pathway for a good education is also predicted on health. So they're all interlinked. I think the challenge, though, right now we're facing is how the city is choosing to ensure that economic justice is built from a rich enough economy of business stability. And so one thing that I would remiss if I didn't say it right now, we have a clear sense of mandate on housing, but there's not a clear sense of what is the mandate for business growth or business strategy. And only that can give you the kind of jobs that we want to see for economic justice. Currently, where I support SBIDC and our brothers and sisters who work on industrial spaces across the city, we are the lifeline for these companies. We're like on the front lines with them. We help them navigate. They are unique companies which much heavier regulated for good reason. Mm-hmm. However, the way this city and the prior administrations have invested in these businesses, much less the folks like us who help connect them and support them, that is currently at risk. And so it's a real challenge. And I go back to, like, is this mayor committed to ensuring there's a rich enough economy to create the jobs, the livable pathways? Because without those companies having certainty, there's no jobs.
There it is. There it is. You can default to corporate responsibility as your strategy, and that makes sense. And also, if there isn't stability and growth, then we can't get to the opportunities that ensure that I'm working towards wages that I can live on, and that this job I have is part of a city that is sustainable and resilient for the future. Last lightning round question.
Okay.
16 years ago, again, bring it full circle. You were on that panel outside. It was a rally, and you were saying lots of important things. Here's what you said, quote unquote, to find your path in life, you have to get out of your comfort zone, especially if you have a vision. Still true.
Still true.
And on that note, I will simply say this. This has been a pleasure. I think there's plenty more to talk about. Do you miss Oregon? How often do you get back? Do you get back to Oregon?
I do get back.
What do you love about it? I've never been there. What do you love about it?
Oh, God, there's a lot of things I love. I do love the fact that there's no humidity in the summer.
Shout out to no humidity.
No, I remember looking out on the vista when I drove to my part-time job when I was finishing college. Mm-hmm. And I remember looking out, and I was looking at they are actually mountains compared to the hills here, but we'll call them hills. The hills in Oregon and trees. And I remember thinking, I am going to be changing and trading up this natural beauty for man-made beauty. They're still beautiful in my book.
That's right.
But the thing about Oregon is that there's just an amazing amount of nature that, it has been touched, but there's far less buildings, a lot more skyline of yes, it does have blue sky days in Oregon, though most Oregonians would tell you, no, it rains all the time, don't come. But no, I do go back. My family, my parents, sister are all there. And so we go back at least twice a year.
As you were saying it, you were smiling. This is what we're not doing this. We just do an audio pod. What you can't see is you were smiling as you were thinking about it. It was clear, like you were there and you were like smelling and seeing.
Yeah, I mean, my childhood growing up, my favorite memory is early mornings. We had a very very old boat. We water skied, and my favorite memories were getting up early with my dad. My sister and I and brother, we all loaded up in the vehicle, drove to the lake. No one would be on the lake, and we called it glass because the water was just beautifully like pure, no
Yeah.
ripples, no wind yet, and we'd water ski. And it's just a sense of awe of nature, and also like, who am I in this big world? And I think for me, like in New York, I find those tiny moments. There's horns blaring, there's people yelling, but there's this moment I try to find the equivalent here, which is I'm in this amazing city with this amazing energy, but it's a little harder to think sometimes of like quiet solitude. So that's what I do miss in Oregon.
Listen, anybody who's listening, take your moment, close your eyes, take yourself to Oregon right now. Just
Right
close
now.
your eyes and think of it.
Little trees, a lot of trees.
Water like glass.
Water like glass. And the sun rising, and this moment of like quiet, and just imagine like anything's possible.
Thank you very much for this time together. This was an absolute pleasure. Lots more to come.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.